Hello and welcome to Inside the ER. My name is Dr. Patrick Garrity and I'm a practicing board-certified emergency physician. You're joining us today for our 8th episode entitled Doctors in Training. I was afraid to use that phrase, doctors in training, because it was a well-known medical education company back in the day, and I don't want to get sued. But it appears they have gone under, so I think I'm okay. RIP DIT. If you've ever been inside the ER or a hospital and seen a line of people in short white coats following someone else in a long white coat, then you may have asked yourself the alternative title for this episode being, who the heck are all these people? Last episode I said we'd be back in 2 weeks-ish. And since then my beautiful wife had a healthy baby girl, so by 2 weeks, I really meant 4 weeks. Forgive the delay, but now we're back. Now, if you haven't listened to our previous episodes, you're going to be lost, so do as you will. Also, have any questions, feedback, suggestions for future episodes, late night musings? Don't hesitate to email at insidetheer@gmail.com. Today we're going to talk about the stages of metamorphosis a physician undergoes, from student to resident to attending. So listen up, because you're going to learn about the different levels of physician providers you may encounter inside the ER. You may say to yourself, no need. I won't go to a teaching hospital. Trust me, you can encounter a student or a resident anywhere. And that's a good thing, because the more eyes on you as a patient, the better. Even if a hospital doesn't house any teaching programs or residencies, outside students and residents may work there, including the ER. In fact, in some rural areas at night, you'll find a lone ER resident managing the department. And aren't you a little interested to hear what us physicians go through? Come on, let's have a listen. We'll start with the first stage, medical students. I'm not talking about pre-med, that's like the pre-egg in this metaphor. Also, this is a very American progression, so if you're listening from elsewhere, just understand that besides a rare combined program, we have to go through a 4-year college or university first before medical school. It's a lot and it's quite inefficient. Okay, so the medical student, or the egg in this process, called simply med student, they have not yet finished their degree. Med school in the US is 4 years long and can be absolute hell. Please take pity on these poor souls. You'll know them by their short white coat, I'm talking hip length, informal name tag, and usually nervous demeanor. They should introduce themselves as a med student and will often just use their first name. If you're seeing them inside the ER, they're probably in their second year or later. The first 2 years of medical school are more classroom focused, with a heavy shift towards clinical experience after that. Med students go through clinical rotations, also called clerkships, where they spend weeks working alongside doctors of a specific specialty. Since ER is a mandatory rotation, med students will come in all different varieties. A 4th-year student should be more skilled than a 2nd year, except a 2nd year interested in the ER may surprise you, while a 4th year forced to be there may suspiciously disappear for long periods of time. If you find yourself inside the ER and a medical student comes to see you, do not be worried. A med student's preceptor is keenly aware of what they're capable of and will only assign them patients they can handle. When I work with a student, difficult patients will see together from the get-go, but I also try to find them the perfect patient. By perfect, I mean someone not critically ill, who can communicate effectively and may have an interesting condition. The med student will see you like any other provider would. Present your case to the physician, and then they'll decide a plan together. Make no mistake, the doctor is the one in control here, and will see you just like normal after the med student, if not with them. When there's a critical patient, the med student is another pair of hands, and I will direct them to assist without jeopardizing care. The next stage, the larva in this metaphor, is the resident, also called the resident physician. Now this is a big jump, because the resident has finished medical school and earned their degree, either an MD or a DO, so they are a doctor, a physician. You can spot them by their ID, which will say doctor and may also say resident or house staff or something, and their longer white coat, just above the knee, perhaps. Their title is Dr. So-and-so, and while perhaps lacking in confidence, especially that first year, they should introduce themselves as such. The major caveat here is that they are still training and must practice under an attending physician's license. This training is the residency that newly graduated physicians go through to learn the skills and gain the experience needed to practice on their own. The process of matching into a residency is a whole thing, but I'll briefly say that med students apply to residency programs, interview, rank their choices, get ranked themselves by those programs, and then a computer program determines your future. On match day, everyone finds out where they're headed, and if you don't like it, tough noogies. If a student really dislikes a program, then best not to rank it at all. Most students apply to a single specialty. I only apply to emergency medicine residencies, while others apply for internal medicine, pediatrics, you get it. Other students know that they're applying to a very competitive specialty, like plastic surgery, and there's a chance they may not get a spot. So they also apply for less competitive but similar residencies, like in general surgery, and rank them lower on the list. It was first called residency because back in the day, it was expected you'd practically live at the hospital, rarely going home. People later realized that entirely sleep-deprived and depressed doctors make more mistakes, and so things have thankfully changed for the better a bit. My residency was nowhere near as brutal as yesteryear, but the physical and emotional stress residents suffer from is still very much present. It's time for a break. We'll be right back after word from our sponsor. Are you currently inside the ER? Are you waiting to be seen? Then listen up, because today's sponsor of Inside the ER is you, and your insight that the more eyes on you, the better. Some patients scoff and try to turn away med students, but that's not you, because you know that another set of eyes on you is a good thing, so nothing gets missed. Some patients try to demand the attending only sees them when a resident walks in first, but that's not you. You know that residents are doctors too, and the more doctors that see you, the safer you'll be. You also know that residents and students are still in the thick of their book learning, while the attending is years away from it and has probably forgotten most of it. So let them all in, you say. The more patients they see, the better we'll all be. Now, back to the show. The plight of the resident is interesting as compared to a medical student. As a medical student, you are constantly studying, taking tests, cycling through different specialties and preceptors. You receive very little respect, but also not much is expected of you, so it can balance out. As a medical resident, you are still studying and taking exams regularly, but suddenly have an immense amount of clinical responsibility and expectation heaped upon you. Coupled with a much tougher schedule, some residents are still working 30-hour shifts these days, and it can make for a miserable experience. Emergency medicine is not the worst when it comes to residencies. Our time in the ER is very intense, but since we work shifts that are 12 hours maximum, we have built-in off time that other specialties envy. But don't worry, I still had to do terrible rotations in other specialties with insane hours. Perhaps we'll get into this in a later episode, but physician depression, especially among residents, is a serious problem. Over the course of my residency in New York City, 3 residents from different NYC programs jumped off of buildings. That was 1 per year on average. It was shocking, it was horrifying. So, just as with the students, show some compassion to these poor newbie doctors. Okay, I'm getting sad, let's move on. If you go to an ER with an emergency medicine residency, then you'll likely be seen by residents primarily. You may hear that first-year resident be referred to as an intern or a junior resident or a PGY1. That's postgraduate year 1. Often the first year will see you, then the senior resident. The residents will present your case to the attending, and the attending will see you, but the residents will do most of the work. There are, of course, exceptions here. In my residency, the ER was simply so busy that attendings often saw patients on their own as well. If you go to an ER without an ER residency, you may still encounter residents, either ER residents from a different hospital or in-house residents of a different specialty, usually internal medicine. Where I am now, I will occasionally work with an internal medicine resident, and just like with a student, I'm mindful about where I send them and how I use them. In fact, I'll share with you the ground rules I set whenever I meet a new student or resident. We'll do some role playing. You're the student or the resident, and I'm me, okay? Alright, number 1. If the patient looks deathly ill, immediately come find me. No playing hero first. Number 2. Do not promise any specific test or treatment to the patient. If you tell the patient we're doing a test that we ain't doing, then I gotta go have an awkward conversation. Number 3. If you hear an alert over the intercom, like a cardiac arrest or a trauma or something, come running. That high-stress situation is the best time to learn. Number 4. Tell me your assessment of the patient and your plan, as in what you think could be going on and what you want to do about it. Even if it's a bad plan, it's still important to come up with one and then we can modify it later. Number 5. Never document something you're not going to address. If you write in the chart that the patient could have a blood clot, then you need to address that either with a test or an explanation. And 6, lastly, stay hydrated, eat, go to the bathroom, and go home when I tell you to. Okay, role playing over. You did great. That last rule is about wellness. These kids got it hard enough. I'm certainly not going to add to their misery by working them so hard that they don't have time to pee or keeping them over shift. Okay, so this silly metamorphosis metaphor, now it falls apart. Because I don't think the next stage, the fellow, fits being a pupa. Once a resident successfully completes residency, they can opt to start practicing, becoming an attending, or they can pursue a fellowship. A fellowship is an additional training program for doctors who wish to obtain specialized skills and knowledge. So an ER doctor, after residency, could start working as a regular ER attending, like me, or pursue a fellowship in, toxicology, let's say, to add that to their knowledge. Or they could undergo a sports medicine fellowship and focus on outpatient care and completely change their practice. Another example would be an internal medicine doctor. After residency, they could begin practicing as an internal medicine attending, or they could pursue a cardiology fellowship and become a cardiologist and again, totally change their practice. And now this leads right into the final stage, the adult, the butterfly, the attending physician. An attending has completed their training, passed their licensing exams, obtained their medical license, and are probably board certified. Oh, I need to explain that. Every specialty has its own organization, the American Board of Emergency Medicine for us, that certifies doctors as qualified to practice clinically. Basically, we have to keep studying and taking exams throughout our careers. It's a lot of time and money so you don't get rusty. It's not against the law or anything to practice medicine without board certification, but it's a bit, sus. Is that what kids these days are saying? Anyway, so how do you recognize an attending? Their ID may indicate it, and as I said earlier, you may see them being trailed by a gaggle of students and residents. Or they may have a longer white coat still. Now you may be asking Patrick, Broski, how long is your white coat? Floor length? Does a medical student have to carry it behind you? Nah, trick question. It doesn't exist. Last time I wore a white coat was for a headshot, and it was a loner. Like, that blazer they make you wear at country clubs? But yeah, I haven't worn one inside the ER since medical school. ER doctors often don't. We're frequently encountering bodily fluids that have been expelled from orifices both natural and created. There's no need to bring white fabric into that. Also, we need to be able to get our hands clean, then dirty, and then clean again at a moment's notice. Long sleeves are a no-no. Whenever I see another attending of whatever specialty with that big old white coat, I sometimes wonder if they're just showing off. But then I remember there's a caveat here. 2 of them, in fact, and they're big ones. The first is that for many attendings, wearing a white coat is an expectation, either from the program they work for, the staff that they work with, or the patients themselves. Patients understand that ER doctors prefer, and they deserve, to wear the glorified pajamas that are scrubs, but otherwise people expect doctors to be in uniform. The other reason a lot of attendings decide to dress up like a butcher is to avoid misidentification. This is a big problem for doctors who are women, people of color, or just look young. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen a female doctor be called nurse, or will get a complaint after the visit saying, I never saw a provider. Oh, but they did. It just wasn't an old white man. I have a distinct memory of this misidentification happening during my first year rotation in med school. I, the nervous, scruffy med student in a fresh white coat, trailed behind the ER resident with her ID and obvious doctor badge. There's like this separate badge some people wear that says doctor in big letters. She entered the room, introduced herself clearly, and then interviewed the patient as I quietly pressed myself into a corner. As a med student, one of your greatest fears is getting in the way. Halfway through the conversation, the patient, an older white man, loudly interrupted with, "Can I see a doctor?" I, dumbfounded, raised my finger and pointed at the ER resident, a South Asian woman. Then, speaking like a toddler, I mumbled, She's a doctor. Oof. Very awkward. Well, that's it for this episode. Now go out there and use your newfound knowledge to spot doctors in various stages of training, and be sure to show some empathy to those overworked and underslept students and residents. We'll be back in 2 weeks, I think, I hope, we'll see. If you liked the episode, please follow, subscribe, download, leave a 5-star review, leave a 5-star rating, and so everyone you know. If you didn't like it, feel free to keep listening and pretending you love it, and tell everyone you know to do the same. You can send in your comments and your guess as to how often, on average, doctors wash their white coats to insidetheer@gmail.com. Never may be right, and this is why I don't wear one. I can't be trusted. Thanks for listening, and all the best.